Yeah, for this live stream, we're going to be basically going over the idea of these anti-bullying campaigns and some of these equality campaigns to really discuss some of the ideas behind them because I think we need to really kind of bring some of the things to the forefront because they're not exactly what they're actually portraying themselves to be. Let's first of all look at some of the anti-bullying campaigns. Is if you look at some of these things, especially these things are more of a phenomenon that comes online when it comes to the anti-bullying campaigns. When it comes down to this, is these it's mainly these anti-bullying type of squads and stuff. Is what ends up happening is they usually it's usually based off an accusation of bullying nowadays because really what's happened is true examples of bullying really are not exactly looked at, and those aren't the ones that are actually being essentially. It's not we're not actually defending people who are actually getting really bullied and trying to show support for these people, just emotional support. What's happening is we're seeing a gang mentality against any type of generic accusations of what we're claiming as bullying. And this could just be some benign comment, and this is what we're seeing online. And this is now, I would say Twitter's probably the worst because Twitter things blow up the quickest because I think we're talking a smaller community compared to the community sizes of Facebook and YouTube, where the actual comment development is a little bit slower and a little more naturally flowing. So when people say on YouTube, oh, there's YouTube bullying, I highly doubt that because you might have some harsh comments, but on the whole with it, it's really not a case with it. And the same thing with YouTube. You might have harsh comments, but it doesn't really develop into that case. Um, I see Twitter as a very, very big problem because of the fact is things can blow up very, very quickly because it tends to be very, very trend based, and its initial posts tend to stay up for within I would say 24-hour period, and within that period with it you can have essentially massive rolls of attacks, and you could essentially have someone being labeled as quote unquote bullying. Then once that person is labeled as bullying, they're essentially going to be attacked. Now, if that person's not actually bullying someone and they have a benign attack, and they have a benign comment, then you're going to have a roll of attacks. Well, really, if that was a benign comment to begin with and they did not mean any harm, and it was taken completely out of context, guess what every one of those attacks are? We're talking every one of those attacks are actually bullying. This is where we get to these anti-bullying campaigns, or I like to say crusades. What we're talking about here is these anti-bullying campaigns then are now becoming essentially basically groups of bullies. So everything they're looking on stopping, they're creating new groups of. And this is what happens when we get this all goes back to the idea of force. Basically, instead of basically just normally letting things progress out and dealing in a normal attitude, what we're doing is we're basically going with something where we're allowing people to take things out of context, and we're allowing people to go to this mob mentality of kill the guy. He made a statement that I took out of context. I'm claiming that's bullying, and let's kill him. It doesn't matter if it's a male or female. It doesn't matter what they are. They made a statement I don't like. Let's kill him. And that's basically what we're talking about here. Uh, I I had a situation with this, and I'm guaranteeing that millions of other people have had situations like this. And guess what? Your little bullying crusades are actually bullying themselves. And this is basically what we're seeing. So you're not fighting for people not to be bullied. You're bullying yourself. That's all you're doing. It doesn't matter what you claim you're doing. Oh, I'm doing it. I'm doing it for the right of people. No, you're not. You're just bullying. And if you wanted to actually look for actually legitimate type of things, why don't you actually look for something actually that is an attack? If you see an attack on a person that is actually of a person making a benign comment, and then you see the person being attacked, why don't you tell that other person that's attacking him, cut it out, and that would be essentially standing up against the bullying. That's how you do it. You want to end it as soon as possible. If you start joining the mob, guess what? You're actually part of the problem, not part of the solution. That's not how we actually get to actually solving this problem of bullying. All you're doing is you're creating more problems, and you're just basically all you're doing is you just made a bigger problem than there actually was. Even if there was an actual one bully going after one person in in a situation like that, well, guess what? You've now created basically you now created a much larger problem than you could ever dream of. And you trying to claim that you're taking the higher road, guess what? You're not. You've made the situation 10 times worse than it could ever be, when it could actually have been easily solved by basically just normal discourse. You've now basically blown the whole thing out of proportion and actually created a system where now, instead of dealing with maybe one bully and one person, or maybe a couple bullies and one person being bullied, now you're dealing with basically is basically 40 bullies bullying one person, and that is maybe like 40 bullies bullying maybe 3 bullies, and those 3 bullies still bullying another person. Now you have a huge problem on your hands, and this is what needs to be understood. And we have not even gotten to that point. And if we look at that, that's complete and utter hogwash. Now you get to the idea of equality, and that this is within the same topic. When we look at equality, we'll see this on the same topic. Is you'll see a lot of this on rights I fight for equality. Well, are my rights equal to yours? No, 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 no. They're not. I don't fight for those ideas of equality. I fight for my ideas of equality. Well, if you're not fighting for actual true equality, then you're not fighting for equality. You're basically it's nothing more than a garbage slogan that you basically put on your bumper sticker, put on your Twitter profile, your Facebook profile, your YouTube, or whatever, and it doesn't mean anything because you're not actually standing by it. If equality actually meant anything, you would actually stand by it. You'll see a lot of these things on when you get to alternative lifestyle people with it. They'll say, "Oh, I believe in equality." Well, you only believe in equality because it benefits yourself. You're not actually believing, and you're using it to essentially attack other people. You're not actually believing in actual true equality. Which means rights for everyone. You're believing in equality. You're believing basically in extra rights for yourself, and that's what's going on here. And this is where we get a lot of hogwash. And I know people are going to say my whole stream is a little bit early today, but I know, but this is kind of an important issue, and this is where we get to these points. And when we see these points, is basically that people need to understand that equality really needs to mean what it really says. It needs to mean that everybody's equal. If everybody's not equal, then you're basically a hypocrite. and we've seen plenty of hypocrites out there, and they're coming from the left, and these people are saying, well, I'm pansexual, or I'm bisexual, or gay, or transgender, or any of these other things, or I'm a feminist and all these other things like that, and I support equality. Well, do you support the right of a white straight person? No, 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 no. No, that doesn't count. Well, then you're not for equality. Because the fact is, if you start attacking these people, then you're not for equality. You're basically, all you're doing is you're basically for extra rights. You believe yourself as a superior group, and when you call for an actual group superior, that would be bigotry and racism, and that's what it's called. That's not equality. That's the exact opposite. Those would be the same groups as the Nazis. Those would be the same groups as white supremacists, as black supremacists. Doesn't matter. Those are the same groups like that. And you should consider yourself in the same line. And that should be no different when it comes down to that. And people need to understand that. You're not for equality. Just the same thing as these people who are anti-bullying. You're not for anti-bullying because you are bullying. And when we look at this needs to be understood. And I think this is an important discussion because the fact is if we're actually going to do realistic things to stop bullying, we need to understand where these things come from. First of all, a lot of things we need to understand where these bullies are coming from in their household situations and where these things are coming from in their overall situations in their personal lives, because we need to look at the whole situations where these things are coming from. Be realistic here instead of actually being unrealistic and basically create a freaking mob. This is not bring out the torches and pitchforks time. Why don't we actually act like realistic adults and actually try to solve these problems? And once we start to do this, you're going to realize that the actual outcome is going to be a lot better, and people are going to actually be a lot happier. And it boils down even into mental health, and you're going to realize that sometimes there's mental health issues behind these, and you're going to realize sometimes and then there's even especially online and Twitter only has 150 characters. You only can say so much. So if you say, oh, but you didn't mention this, well, guess what? There's only 150 characters. You can't mention everything. Oh, you didn't mention this on this topic. Well, if Twitter would give me more characters, I would have. And you can't use essentially a special case with it when you're basically mentioning a certain topic. You're basically going to mention, in the case of doesn't matter what the case, you're going to mention on the base of healthy individuals. If it's a general topic, you're not going to mention in special cases. We assume in special cases, obviously, and this is where the whole point comes from. And then what it ends up bringing out is bullies come out of thin air with it, and then they try to claim, oh, I'm anti-bullying. No, you're bullying, because this is what it comes out to. And we need to understand this. And you can't claim yourself as being anti-bullying when you start coming out with this mob mentality and just going after people. Now, when we do this, is you basically resort to this just complete destruction of any type of normal society. I mean, basically you're then delving into the idea that we cannot have any type of function of society then, and that's basically you're playing into the ideas of, as we delved into earlier, Marxism. And they essentially want a breakdown, and that's the first way to get a breakdown, is to go into mob rule. And because we're not we're not the idea of a direct democracy. You find mob rule, and mob rule is usually the first start with it because they'll start. It's to get people on these ideas of these social justice points. Doesn't matter what group you say, oh, we need equality for this, we need equality for that, we need equal membership, or we want 50-50. And, well, you can't force people. People have their own rights to, people have their own rights to personal decisions, and that's where it goes down to. And in a free society, people can choose what they want to do, and that's just what they wanted. If they want to go in a different direction than what a quota system would give them, guess what? They can do that. This isn't a communist society, so you can't force that. You're not always going to get an even number in each field, which is why when you start to look at, like, one of the things with that people tend to talk about equality is they start saying, oh, women are making less than men. They're making 77 cents per men's dollar. Now, when we start to actually break this down and we start to look at things such as experience, things such as looking field per field, and we start to break this down, we'll see that it's either A, even, or even in certain countries, women are actually making more than men. And this is a major key to look at. And when we start to look at these factors, we'll actually see that when we look at men next to women, if women are making more than men, and that this is where there's actually, because this actual uneven push, we're seeing women actually being paid more because per this amount, actually slightly more, because of this equality push. And that's not fair, because if they're being paid more per the actual same job and same experience and same field and everything like that, they're this isn't equality. This is basically where they're getting benefits that they don't deserve. Because if we're going to say everybody has the same thing, men can have paternity leave, women can have maternity leave, so that part's even. If we're going to say that we're going to judge men and women by the same fields, we end up getting pretty much the same numbers, except women are getting more. Well, that's not essentially fair, because the idea of equality is even pay for even work, and it doesn't matter who you are. Well, what's actually contributing to some of these things is, on the high end, is women just aren't interested in a lot of these higher paying jobs. They're less likely, personality wise, to be asking for raises. That's contributing. That's another contributing factor. Another contributing factor is males are more willing to work in dangerous jobs, which give you, which are due to the higher risk, give you higher wages, and women are very, very unwilling to work these jobs, because if you look at the actual breakdown of these jobs, such as road work, such as military, such as these other different things, you're seeing that men are working at such a vastly dominant number that we're not seeing this happen. We're not seeing anywhere close to equal. But when it comes to equality, you don't see these people that are saying, "Oh, we need equality." Well, are you willing to have equality in the for working road work? Are you willing to have the equality working on the oil rigs? No, 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 no. We don't want equality there. We just want equality in politics and law, in these types of at the business in business at the CEO positions, and it shows that they don't want equality across the board. They just want equality in these high-paying positions, and this has been reiterated in several of the points, and that's where equality doesn't really pan out. That they're not really looking for equality. They just want to basically have the higher paying money, without really earning it. When it comes to these equality activists, and this, and if you look at all of them and look at their background, they're all Marxists, and it's the whole thing again. So you basically, that's why you find them, they have no point going into a mob rule, because mob rule eventually develops into Marxism. I mean, this is how it happened out in Russia, where Russia became the Soviet Union. Eventually, they actually became smart and eventually delved back down into the country they are now. So they're back down to a uh, constitutional republic, so they can actually have their freedoms again. But when you see this happen, you see countries such as China, such as North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, and these are just horrible places to live. And this is what their equality pushes for. This is what their bogus campaigns of anti-bullying push for. And we need to understand this. And um, when they do this, you have that, and then you get these. Even society, they'll in these cultures, they'll push to basically cover up crimes to make the system look better. So, and then for those non-compliant, they basically kill. So, if you want that, that's equality, and you'll basically be living in that. But basically, if you want freedom of choice, you're going to have to deal with certain levels of inequality, and that inequality is basically those who want to work for it and those who don't, and a mix of that and personal choice. Personal choice automatically creates any personal choice plus actual personal drive creates inequality just naturally, and that's the whole point. Now, you could get rid of certain levels of inequality by going back to a sound monetary policy and ending all cronyism with government by basically going to a bare bones government, ending public aid, ending foreign aid, ending corporate welfare, ending all government contracts, and basically going with the government making its own equipment, and that would work. And that would be how it would be done. Or the government would buy a la carte, as it would need from any company, but it would not be paying for any of these products like R&D or any of that garbage. It would be basically buying these things a la carte and either retrofitting or whatever the need might be, and that would be how things would work. But but that would be how you would push for equality, because when you get on the sound monetary policy, which would be basically currency would be either gold or silver, and then when it would be that, what would happen is uh, then money would be a lot more equal. You'd see the equality that was financially seen previous to 1913. And what you would notice there is previous to 1913, there was no income tax. And that's a major key factor there, is all these free things and all this other extra garbage is actually what's created the income inequality and a lot of this personal inequality, and that's where it came from, was this progressive era and this more idea of this of these progressives and these Marxists that have actually gone into office, and this higher spending from both those people and from the neoconservative Trotskyites that have gone into office to basically want all the military weapons to expand on the military, which is basically following the same foreign policy that was under Woodrow Wilson to basically create the false idea of this common defense when there really is no such idea that actually makes any sense. So when we look at these ideas of anti-bullying campaigns and equality, they're really kind of false ideas, because anti-bullying just leads to more bullying. Equality uh, campaigns just leads to more inequality. So if you want to actually solve it, we actually need to actually get to the root causes. and none of these, neither of these actually want to actually go to the root causes, and that's the whole point. Is if we actually went to the root causes, we'd actually get to solutions, and there is no actual reason to want to go to solutions in the first place. And that's the whole problem. Is when we look at these, is their whole thing is basically about power. You have the people, anti-bullying people, they just want more power, and basically they just want to be the bullies in the whole system. So when they make an accusation about bullying, and basically I would say well over 99% of the time it's not bullying, and so they can be the bullies, and that's basically it. It's not about actually stopping anything. It's about being able to be the bullies. They go, hey, we have an option to be the bullies from the actual mob, so which actually makes, as I said, makes the situation a lot worse. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do this, and most of the time it's not people that actually be impacted with this. It's actually making the situation much worse. So people are actually going out there, and it's people that wouldn't be normally affected with this. It's people who basically are making these blind accusations, and and it's really only from usual people that are tend not to be as pro tend not to be pro liberty, and those who are pro liberty and pro voluntarism are not going to be the ones out there going out there bullying people and being against equality. That's not where you're going to be finding any of this garbage, because they really don't care. They're frankly they couldn't care less. But when you get these people who tend to be leaning into more government, and they'll want protectionism, and then they want basically their group to be ahead, and all this other garbage like that. And then basically is you'll find on the anti-bullying is they want to be the bullies now, and they think basically they can jump on everything with it, and they think everyone out there is a bully. Meanwhile, no matter what the comment is, if they think they see something there with it, they're gonna jump on and basically create the most hateful, vile, disgusting comments out there possible, and they'll basically like and let all these sexist comments go right by, when they could be saying, I'm looking for anti women's rights comments with it. Now they could be liking basically misogynist comments all along the way, because they're against that guy who I didn't like, who I thought was making a comment that I didn't like, but I didn't even understand what the comment was saying to begin with. But because I don't like that comment, for what reason I don't understand, or what girl made the comment, I'm going to basically like these comments from these people who are making sexist comments, because the fact is they're still against that guy or girl. It doesn't matter who it is, and that's what it boils down to. As you'll have them do this regardless, and it's totally irrational behavior. And to me, I just consider it fascinating. Is they will essentially go and ally themselves with people who are completely against their own interests. I mean, why would you essentially ally yourself with someone who should be completely against your own interests, and who should be essentially an enemy of you, when you're actually when you would essentially should be allied with the person who you're actually attacking? And that's the funny part of it. You should at least consider the person who you're attacking as neutral at best. I mean, you shouldn't be, and then you should be attacking those ones who are essentially attacking that you were allied with. And it doesn't make any sense with some of these people that are called themselves equality or anti-bullying, and then but that this is what you get out there, and they act completely irrational because of the way they've been taught with this idea of this mob rule, and just makes them act completely irrational. And that's just something that's quite humorous. And I think we need to understand that, and it's just something that makes a lot of sense for people to actually look at. Because when we look at some of the ideas of uh, the ideas of um, of the mob rule, and of things such as of this anti-bullying, and of different other factors, we need to understand that it just doesn't make any sense for people to align themselves with what they state. And when we're doing that, it just, if they actually thought of what they're actually doing in a smart manner, they would actually start to look at what they're doing from an actual intelligent method, and actually start viewing these things um, as what is actually my best interest. And from some of the ideas of that were actually brought forth by people like Ayn Rand, but since they're not taught her ideas to begin with, and they're actually taught kind of hidden some of the ideas of some of the ideas that are actually from Karl Marx and some of his ideas. But are not always named from him. They don't realize what they're basically going with. That it basically goes down to this anti-freedom point, that there's nothing to it, that they're actually going against their own perspective, and their perspective should be actually for their own interest, and they should be fighting for their own interest and not fighting against it, and that should be what they should be going for. It doesn't matter if we're talking bullying or if we're talking equality. When it comes to equality, they should be saying, well, what matters that would make the most sense? Well, when it comes to equality, is you should be looking at voluntary exchange. If I start attacking any specific group for equality, that's going to limit my access for voluntary exchange. That's going to be a negative impact on me, and that's not going to work out for my interest in the long run. But if I act positively to that group, I'm going to have more access than the person who acts negatively to them, and I'm going to have actually more interactions with them, and it's going to make me look better, and that's what needs to be understood. And that's something that's a little bit interesting that people need to actually look into. When it comes to bullying, they need to understand that instead of looking at the thing at face value, they need to look at things a little more widely and view things. Maybe there's a little more to it than meets the eye. Maybe we actually look at some of the things behind the actual surface. Find out why that initial bullies, or why the initial bully, or why the initial bullies are doing this. If you think someone is a bully with it, start questioning them why they're doing this. Maybe you'll get an answer. Instead of attacking back, why not ask them about their statement? Sometimes you'll find out that it wasn't a bullying statement, and you can actually get confirmation. And you don't lead to basically where you end up being the one that's bullying the person, and start an actual bullying war against them. and basically acting in such a way that you're actually harming someone that basically did nothing wrong. And when you do that, you'll actually realize that you'll actually be better off in the end, and that's the way you can actually solve the actual issue. But that's how things need to work. If you just start basically going on this attack frenzy, you're not helping yourself out, and you're definitely not helping them out because you're not getting an answer. Especially in some place on Twitter, you only have 150 characters. You're not gonna. They have limited ability to basically come forth with being able to answer all all potential options on the perspective of a question that they could respond with. So basically, is there would be no feasible way that they could answer back with all potential scenarios at which if they were to respond to a question, an initial post that they could never they could never answer back with every possible scenario. They could come back at them for even likely feasible scenarios to even rare cases. So when you do that, is you're basically creating a situation to where any benign comment could essentially that's essentially open ended could essentially be leading into problems. And if you're basically looking for a fight, essentially you're going to be from this person. If you're looking for a fight from the person, essentially you're going to see it, and the person's and most often with it, I mean, you could essentially get a person's willing to fight back, but most often people are just going to say, especially on Twitter, because usually the Twitter storm blows over within one day. Most often people are just going to ignore it because the fact is it's just going to be ramblings from. I'm just using Twitter as an example, because the other ones don't seem to be as susceptible to this, but it just usually blows over within one day, and it just doesn't seem as and it you'll have people liking comments with it that is completely irrational. I mean that this shows the mindset behind Twitter, and it shows that Twitter tends to state, "Oh, we're for free speech," but it shows that I mean they're willing to let irrational behavior happen on one side, but someone actually makes a comment toward one person on more that's and the person's more conservative or libertarian, and they'll basically skin them alive and say you're banned just for making that, or basically, or if you're uh, going after them for being, or if you're making statements saying that there's any bias, they'll tend to in the whole network they tend to limit you and limit your access, and that's what ends up going on there. Now, I don't feel YouTube is as bad as that, uh, but it does still have its problems. Facebook is mainly its major problems happen with the pandering to government. That's mainly where it comes from. Is it panders to the is if it stopped pandering to the government, I think it would be a lot better, and they could actually improve the quality of the interactions between people, and just leave people alone, and stop trying to and especially what they need to do is stop trying to police things and state that, oh, this is this is even with YouTube, stop trying to state that, oh, that might be that comes from that is partial funding from this government, so that might be propaganda, that this is something YouTube does as well, and that is kind of bogus. There, because the fact is, people are born and capable of deciding what information they want to read. So when it comes to that, that is one way to solve on social media. But when it comes to the actual bullying, people don't really bully in person anymore. This is well past like when I went to school, where people actually would actually bully in person. We've gotten to the point of bullying online, but when it comes to the actual bullying online, is it doesn't really happen, I think, necessarily to the degree that we're noticing that the campaigns are blowing them out to be in proportion. So what ends up happening is uh, what we end up getting is we get these mobs that basically attack. They're more up to attack people for statements that aren't bullying, and this is something we end up getting these irrational mobs that are basically on edge on any type of statement, regardless of what type of context it is. They'll go, oh, that doesn't fit to my ideas with it, so uh, what exactly I wanted that statement to be, thus I'm going to attack. Well, if you're going to attack on that and not try to get confirmation, then you're technically bullying. And that should be what should be noted, is when you do things like that, if you're not going to get confirmation on a statement, that you really can't, that if you can't get on the full thing of understanding, because you're not going to fully understand on that point, then you're really the one that's bullying. And if you're going to come out with derogatory statements when there was no derogatory statement in the first initial ones, then you're the ones that are bullying, and that this is what we're finding out there on social media. And if usually what happens on social media bullying is initial post to people, and if it's not initial post to people, it's not going to be bullying. And what ends up happening is, I think it's this could be also a factor of being clicks, of not wanting new people in, and this could be another factor as well. At least when I went to school with it wasn't as clicky, though this could have been a small variant in this type of small variant in this type of idea, but it wasn't as clicky as what we see with modern systems out there, where I'm seeing that these communities are a lot more clicky than they used to be. And basically what we're seeing is these communities are becoming very, very clicky, and they end up being like attack dogs for any type of idea that they don't like, regardless of if it's rational or not. And that's not what standard discourse should be. If you if you have a potential problem, you ask them to clarify their statement. You just basically state, what did you mean by this, and that they might state that they might say, or you might say, well, what, you might ask them to basically say, well, what about in this case, or what about in that case, and they'll and pretty much online is 99% of people are more than willing to give an answer on those specific cases. I mean, people are usually more than willing to do that. And if you look at my case with it, is I've shown that I do. If you look, they would look to my things, I do give intelligent posts on many topics on Twitter, and I was making intelligent discussions, not like I'm just attacking people. So they would have seen that, and they would have made that discussion. Now, what I think it was is they're like, oh, he's from this background, so like a libertarian conservative background, so I automatically assume I don't like him. That could be also the potential of like what my post was, what my response was in my case with it. So that could have been potentially with that, and they make this accusation that I'm going to be against their point of view. Now, that could be part of the actual problem, and they're more willing to align with other people. Now, that could be part of the reason, and that's potentially part of the issue. And that could be very well the case. And what they do is they could technically go with that and say, well, I see these things here, blah 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 blah, so I'm going to make this judgment here, and that could very well be the case. And I think some people are actually making these judgments based on this and not actually looking at the context of the actual of what the person is stating. And I think what they end up doing is and jumping on this. So basically, so they end up doing this, and but it still goes down to this idea of when you look at these other people's profiles, they'll state they're against bullying, they'll state that they're anti-bullying, they'll state that they want to support that they'll do drives for mental health awareness, they'll state that they'll do drives for that they're for equality. And for me myself with it, I have OCD, so I mean, for as much as the person states they're for mental health awareness, I mean, you did a pretty good job of of going after a person with mental health, with that actually is currently in treatment for a mental health condition. I mean, and this is the person actually the actual post was on. So much good for that one. And it's kind of laughable that they're trying to claim that they do their support of mental health awareness, because that's not much support. And it doesn't matter if they have a condition or not with it. It matters with if you're trying to do that. It should be well beyond your own self. You should actually, if you want to show for awareness, it means you should be beyond yourself. It should be for other people. Because if you want awareness, you want it for other people. That's the whole point. It's not just for yourself. I mean, if it was for yourself with it, you would just take care of yourself, go to the doctor, blah 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 blah. End of story. You wouldn't even mention that you have any conditions publicly, and that would be how it would go. But if you were actually for mental health awareness and actually wanted to raise money for it and all these other things, you would actually be looking at and ensuring that people with mental health conditions were actually, number one, not bullied to begin with, which means they're not being attacked by others. Number two with it is you should be looking for a solid discourse and not just attacking people because of anything. And you shouldn't be, if you're looking for that, it's the idea of protecting numbers of viewers should not be taking place over anything like that. So when it comes to that, is business ethics should take place over everything else. That's one thing with it that actually is going to benefit you in the long run. This goes into a little more of a business discussion, but I think that's important. When it comes to that with it is those people are not going to be solid customers that are going to be promoting essentially bad business ethic. They're going to promote you to bad business ethics because you're going to lose more people in the long run when you have these people like this. It's better to eliminate these poor influences around you and bad customers, because eventually in the long run, when you eliminate these people, you might have a bad swing now, but what's going to happen is it's going to swing forward because people are going to see that you actually stand up for these actual solid principles. And if they see you standing on solid principles, it's going to benefit you in the long run. They're going to see that you actually stand for something positive and not just look as a very, very weak individual. People look as very, very weak individuals don't last. And you'll see that actually numbers with the people who actually have bigger channels that actually stay stagnant right now are people who actually show as very, very weak individuals. People who actually stand on ethics are the ones that are growing. And you're actually seeing those ones right now. They're actually growing with actual legitimacy. That's why I would state that. I'm using YouTube as actually a reference. I think that's the best reference we can go with right now. Specifically because I'm actually on YouTube right now as well, because that makes the most sense. Now, I might not be growing right now with it, subscriber-wise with it, but I think by standing on actual an ethical background with it, I think I'm going to basically get the benefit in the long run by actually standing on an actual idea of actual ethical behavior that is going to end up paying in the long run. And I think that's the way you actually need to go. You can tend to pander and get early and tend to get early amounts of benefits by essentially letting go of any type of ethical standings and be willing to let those slide, but eventually you're basically going to plateau, and these people who are eventually weak individuals as yourself are eventually going to be all you have. And you might get to the point where a lot of your other individuals are going to leave because they were there for some of the content, and when they see you like you are, they're just not going to be interested, and they're going to go on to the other individuals that actually represent themselves as strong people out there that are actually ethically sound. You need to actually stand for something, actually make yourself known, and that's something that needs to matter. Just stating you're against bullying with it, I mean, it doesn't mean anything, because the fact is if you can say, "Oh, I'm against bullying," well, are you actually engaging in bullying yourself by doing that? Well, then you're not against bullying. You're actually for bullying. You could state, "Oh, I'm for equality." Well, are you actually against equality by actually attacking others and actually for the supremacy of a certain group? Well, then you're not for equality, because these things actually matter when you actually put them in practice. And you need to actually if you're going to put them in practice, you need to actually do that. Just because you're for a certain group does not mean it actually matters. It just that just means you're actually trying to benefit yourself, and that's the whole point. And that's the point I've been trying to get across here, is that it tends to be very, very fraudulent and self-serving when you tend to do this, and you're not actually using the actual point to actually stand up to this and actually do what's right, and actually look for an actual, maybe on bullying, look for an actual solution instead of just engage in bullying yourself and think that's the option. Or maybe on equality, actually really mean you mean equality instead of just meaning I hate that other group. Meaning you hate the other group, that's not equality. That means supremacy. That's not equality at all. Just because you support alternative lifestyles does not mean that you basically are for equality. It means that you hate straight people. That's all it means. When you start acting like that, if you have one of these alternative lifestyles and you support alternative lifestyles, that doesn't mean you are for equality with it. When you start attacking straight people, that just means that you're against straight people. It means you're basically you've never been for equality. Equality means equality, and it's pretty the definition in the dictionary is pretty damn clear. It means equal between people, and it doesn't mean any group gets any preferential treatment. It means everybody is equal, and you don't get equal outcomes. You get equal opportunity. That's it. There's nothing beyond that. That's the whole point. And people need to understand that. And when you look at that, you'll see that basically is once people get to that point, you'll see that's basically all it is. And when you see these groups with it, and they're actually they're actually going down the point to where they're becoming exactly what they're trying to fight. They need to realize that they're the problem. They're actually essentially they're in most cases they're much worse than the problem because they made the problem 10 times worse than they actually could ever have believed. In this country, with it, like when they overturned DOMA, you got to understand with it, the people in the Tea Party were actually mostly in support because essentially it, it took money out of the IRS. You have to understand what the Tea Party stood for. Taxed enough already. Essentially, you took money from the IRS. That's a win for the Tea Party. And you had people, you had gay activists that after that point were attacking the Tea Party. The Tea Party never supported DOMA on the whole. They essentially, if you look at one of the Tea Party advocates, Rand Paul has always stated he doesn't want the marriage or his guns registered in Washington. This is the whole point. That would be against DOMA. DOMA's one of DOMA's biggest advocates and actually supporters that actually got it passed. Hillary Clinton. These people that are saying, "Oh, we want equality and we want anti-bullying," is Hillary Clinton, who was actually one that actually bullied people out of these positions in D.C. to try to get her cronies in. Hillary Clinton, who was the one that called black super predators, which would be against, which would be totally against the idea of equality. Hillary Clinton. Who are these? Who are a lot of these so-called equality people for when it came to the 2016 election? Hillary Clinton. So when it comes down to it, is they're not exactly consistent, and then you see these people who are these on these anti-bullying campaigns or equality campaigns, and they're all supporting Hillary Clinton when she's exactly the opposite of what you people should be supporting. When Donald Trump was there, now I don't agree with all of his policies, but when Donald Trump was there stating that basically, if you look at his financial records, he was the one basically backing these gay pride parades in New York year after year after year after year, and you say, oh, he's anti-gay or he's anti-equality, well, you're making no sense. Just because he doesn't want anything forced with anybody does not mean he's against equality. It just means he just doesn't want force. And as we've talked with the previous live stream, force does not equal great outcomes. We even if you check out my thing on the Civil War, which I just put up, you'll actually see the same thing of force actually equates out to horrible outcomes with what ends up happening with that, because you end up putting the civil rights back nearly 100 years because of what ended up happening. And when we look at that, and that's what force caused. So when we look at that, we see that with civil rights is when we look at that, we'll see the same thing: is force never results in good outcomes, and basically is just because Donald Trump doesn't want to force someone does not mean that he's against it. In fact, that would actually be a benefit when you have people like that, and then when you have people like Rand Paul that go. That they don't want it registered. Trust me, if you have any fear of the government being against gays, you don't want your marriage registered in D.C. That's the last thing you want. If you have any type of fear of retribution against any type of alternative lifestyle, the last thing you want is your marriage registered in D.C. That's telling them, hey, look at me, I'm right here. This is my address. This is everything about me. This is my social security number. come and find me. And it basically tells everything about you. Well, guess what? If you're looking for any type of thing for the government to attack you, that's exactly what they're going to do. It's giving them your address and actually where you live and everything about you in your workplace. Now, that's basically, if they wanted to basically send mobs at you to basically harass you, they could easily do it just because of what you did, and if they're against you for that reason. And you might go, oh, but the First Amendment protects it. Yeah, but we see what they've done with that. The First Amendment was supposed to protect the Tea Party's right to have the ability to donate to certain groups and not have their and have anonymity with the groups that they're donating to. We see that the IRS not only released their names, but released their names to other groups, to other political groups, specifically meant to target these individuals. And we see what they did there. So much for that. So when you're trying to state, oh, but he's not for these people aren't for the idea of force. Well, guess what? That's a good idea. You want that. You don't want people saying that we want force out there, and that should be the whole idea. When we see people that are actually for force, you should actually reject that. And that's when it comes to the idea of these bullying campaigns and these, or I should say, crusades. That's a more accurate thing, referring to the first crusades, not the second crusades. And these, then you had these equality crusades, and it basically doesn't make any sense because they're not even legitimate in what they're doing. If we're actually talking about getting people equality and trying to stop bullying, they're not actually looking for a solution, because they're just looking for more bullying, just them doing it, and they're looking for basically superiority, which is what we call bigotry and racism, and that's all it is, and that's what these types of groups are. And we can't state anything other than the same. And people are going to say, oh, this is us attacking them. Well, no, it's not. It's just stating the truth as is. And if they wanted to actually get to a reasonable thing and stop these things from happening, they need to actually start acting like adults, stop this mob rule, because mob rule doesn't solve anything. We actually have, we don't have what is called a direct democracy, which is mob rule. We actually have a representative republic, which is actually derived on the idea of actually civil discourse. This doesn't mean that people can start attacking others on ideas they don't like. You start actually associating with others on a normal level, because if you start doing mob rule, you're going to have all your freedoms stripped eventually, because you're going to get some crazy-eyed person from the Bronx that eventually runs for president that's going to strip all your freedoms away. And that's what's the end result's going to be if you keep acting like this. Or we can actually go in the other direction and get maybe someone from Kentucky that actually can enhance your freedoms and start ending some of this government spying. You basically have those are your two choices right now. You can get a normal person, you can get basically a person who wants to enhance their freedoms from Kentucky, or you can get a crazy-eyed woman from the Bronx who wants to basically steal your freedoms. That's basically what we're looking at right now. And that's basically what this is about. And if you start acting like either this mob mentality, or you start or you actually act like civil human beings and want actually civil discourse and want actually to discuss issues, because there's plenty of issues out there to discuss and start talking about them. and there's plenty of liberty-based solutions that are easy to find, but we're finding a lot of people out there that are just not intelligent enough to discuss these because they're not willing to verse themselves into the actual whole topic. They're just basically buying into slogans that are being spit out by the left, then that's actually meant to get to the idea of mob rule and then the idea of Marxism as a final solution, and then we get no freedom, and we get the end thing, which is going to be either Nazi Germany or Mao's China. Your pick. There is not We're not going to get this idea of a lot of freedom in the U.S. Uh, and things going great. That's not how things work under socialism. I'm sorry, socialism or communism. I'm sorry to just tell you people, but that's not how things work. And when you keep going with mob rule, you're just basically playing right into the hands of these Marxists. That's the way things work. And I'm not fear mongering with this. This is basically what you're doing. You're basically playing right into their hands. And if you want to actually look at pro freedom options, you need to. I'd suggest you actually look at. If you want to look at some options, start looking at. Find where you actually sit politically first by going to the advocates.org. That'll actually is actually very very open type of political quiz. Is a very very short one, and that'll give you an idea with it where you kind of sit. And a lot of you are going to realize that you probably sit a lot differently than you thought you did. And you're going to realize that when it comes down to things is that you're a lot more freedom loving than you actually thought. And when it comes down to things is socialism and communism is statist. If you see on that list, and you'll see statist, libertarian, left, right. Left is basically they only care about social liberalism. Right is economic conservatism, and centrist is basically just middle of the road on everything. But basically, that's what you're going to find with that whole point. And you'll actually see that. I'll leave the link in the description of the thing if you guys want to check that out, because it's an interesting site for people to take the quiz at. And it helps a lot of people out to find out where they actually sit. There's a lot of other political quizzes out there, but I don't feel they're anywhere close to as good. It's short, it's only a few questions, and it's very, very accurate. And you're going to find out where you kind of sit on the actual scale. I mean, most of you on the left are probably going to find out that you're probably libertarian left. You're probably left libertarian, and if you want to find that out, you're probably going to realize that you've been probably duped into thinking that socialism is a great thing when it's actually bad, and you're going to have to start realizing that that you need to start pushing away from these people, stop going with the idea of mob rule, and start going back to actually discourse between people and more voluntary discussion, and stop pushing from these people. And you're going to start realizing that in the long run, and that's the way things need to go. Because if you start pushing away from that, you're going to realize you're not going to have freedom. And if you want freedom with it, that's what it comes with. Freedom always comes with responsibility, and if you want that, you need to have the responsibility to take care of it, because there's you're going to have actions with it, and there's negative things with freedom, and that ends up happening with it. I mean, but that's then the price with freedom, but it's definitely worth it because you don't lose everything from it, and you get choices to make. I mean, do you want to end up going to the store, have no food, and have no choices, and basically be shot at because you just didn't make the right statement on social media, or the right statement in public, or you just didn't agree with something the government said that day. If you disagree with the government, you get shot and killed or sent to a work camp. That's socialism or communism for you. They send you to the work camps. That's not, and basically, and they take your stuff. What they have out in Denmark, that's not socialism. That's a market economy. They do have high tax rates, but they're still a market economy. Uh, and that's basically about it with it. I hope this has been a little bit enlightening for you people. I know it's kind of a little bit of a hard topic for people to kind of swallow, but this is something that's very important to people understand. Is that I think this is a new phenomenon that's really come about, but people need to understand is a lot of these disingenuous movements that have popped up that really they're accomplishing exactly the opposite of what they want to accomplish. And if they want to accomplish what they're looking to accomplish, they need to be actually setting a goal and actually saying, okay, if we want to do this, we need to actually have civil discourse, like let's say bullies, civil discourse. We need to find out where the bully is coming from, find out what's the actual cause, and stop it. We initially stop the actual situation by basically causing some type of separation. We need to basically cause some type of stop of the actual situation, and then see where the bully is coming from, see what's actually happening, and then you basically find out where they're coming from and see if it's actually bullying in the first place. Because if it's not bullying, then don't do any. Then you might not have to do anything, and you might have to actually look into those other people who are actually making the accusation to begin with, and tell them basically take a chill pill and stop making these blind accusations because you're acting irrational. And when it comes to equality, we need to understand that basically is equality needs to be figured with the different things of we need to get to a bare bones government, we need to get to a sound monetary policy, a sound foreign policy, and we need to get to a basically understanding when it comes to the idea of equality is you need to basically take equality at face value and take it from the definition of the dictionary. It's not equality of outcomes, it's equality of actual opportunities. That's it. You don't get equality of outcomes, you get equality of opportunities. That's you can't guarantee anything but that. And then when it comes down to everything else is everybody's guaranteed equality, not just special groups, everyone. This means you don't get to say, I hate that group. No. If you say that, you're not for equality. Once you state that, you're out. You can't claim you're for equality because it shows you're bigoted or you're racist. And yes, you can be racist toward whites. I'm sorry, but yes, you can. You can be bigoted against straight people. It's very easy. It doesn't matter if you try to claim yourself, but I'm a feminist. It doesn't matter. None of these things matter. But I'm pansexual. But I'm transsexual. But I'm bisexual. But I'm gay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what type of group you put yourself in. But I'm black or Asian or Latino or biracial or whatever group you want to put yourself into. Or non-binary or whatever type of specific group you want to put yourself into, doesn't matter. If you don't believe that all people deserve equal opportunities for success, then you are either A, bigoted, or B, racist, or C, all of the above. That's plain and simple. There is no other. And it even applies to religion. If you hate somebody for their religion, you're basically you are bigoted as well. Because if someone states something of a religious statement, and you go after them for that, you're basically being hateful as well, and you're being bigoted, and that's frankly the truth as well, because people have a right to express their faith, and you can't say, oh, that applies to faiths like Islam, but it doesn't apply to Christians. Well, no, it applies to everyone. It doesn't matter if you're. It doesn't matter what faith you are. It applies to every faith, and that's very, very simple. And it doesn't take a genius to figure this out. And if you're going to go for equality and to stop bullying, you need to essentially assume that all these things need to apply. And if you want these things to essentially apply, you can't create two different standards. One standard is plenty enough. It's hard enough to follow as is. Uh, I don't think we need two standards. It's a little bit. It becomes too difficult to keep track of, and one standard's plenty enough. I think one will do plenty for everyone out there, and that's this and that'll be the standard we'll go by. And we don't need any other standard. It's basically it'll be set at we'll have equal opportunity for everyone, not equal outcomes, and that's basically it. You don't judge. You don't judge. If you want equality, you don't judge others. That's it. You don't. If you want to state people, you don't use. You don't use basically false statistics that don't use that don't judge apples to apples when trying to state about equality, because you're not going to get even statistics because of ideas of personal choice. This means that 77 cents to the dollar is not an accurate statistic because it covers ideas of personal choice, which covers points of such things as experience differences. Because when you cover ideas between men and women tend to work less hours, less time in the workplace, and tend to work jobs that pay less. Thus, when it comes down to the actual jobs, the actual outcome becomes 77 cents per dollar that males will work. When we actually equal it out, as we've stated, it goes out to being slightly more. It's only be about like $1.02 to $1 to $1.02 per for women to males, depending on the country. It It's $1.02 for males for females to males. In the UK, I think it's $1.01 for females to males for the US. So it's shown that there is a bias toward females in pay. Now, for these equality people, they go, "Oh, that's a plus." No, that's not a plus. If we're going for equality, it should be even. And when we're talking a 1% difference or a 2% difference, that still is actually pretty substantial. I think we need to understand that if we want equality and we want to stop bullying, we need to actually be legitimate in the actual numbers of how we're going to stop this, and we need to create one standard of basically of opportunity, and where we actually not get where we're looking at an opportunity for things and not an outcome. You can't guarantee outcome because outcome is not always going to be equal. There's actually multiple factors that create outcome. And when it comes to the actual thing of bullying, there's many factors that go into it. And when it comes to accusations, we need to understand that there's a lot of these accusations are not actually legitimate. And we find that where we basically have these things such as witch hunts, where you could have the wrong political ideology and just start discussing on a non-political point, and they're going to want to skin you alive. It could not even be. You could be from linking to a third party thing, and because of that, you could be linking yourself with a third party, and they want to skin you alive because you're a little too close to this party or in their minds, or a little too close to that party, or they just don't know what your ideology is, or they consider it too close to this party and they want to skin you alive for that. And that's where some of these people are. And I mean, especially with these people who try to claim equality. I mean, equality and anti-bullying. I mean, this is just something that needs to go, because the fact is even when I was in school, the fact is before these anti-bullying and equality campaigns came through, I was noticing these were not a huge problem. All of a sudden, they actually bring these campaigns forward, and we notice that these problems become huge. And this shows that what we're noticing is these groups are creating problems, not eliminating them. They're creating them. Is the actual amount of these cases are actually exploding. Um, Basically, is I mean, you had the case of Emma Gonzalez bullying the shooter of Stoneman Douglas that ended up causing a shooting, and then later she claimed herself as a victim. So we're talking cases like that. So when we do this, we actually are getting these cases and basically proclaiming people as victims, and when they're actually essentially these actual horrible bullies, they're actually causing these problems. And all of these bullies, guess what? I hate to tell you, they're coming from one ideology that's always the left. These are the ones that are bullying people. It's not people on the right who are bullying people. People on the right and the libertarian people, they could give less than a hoot about you. They just want to go about their damn business. It's these people on the left that these basically these social justice warriors. They're the ones that love to bully others, and this has really exploded since a lot of these campaigns have essentially emboldened these people, and that's where this is coming from. Now, I don't like making this about being political, but this is what has happened. Essentially, you've created these monsters essentially, and you allow these people to act in such a way that is just horrible. And essentially, they're doing it because they're being told by teachers, oh, these other people, oh, they're horrible people, and they don't believe in equality. And well, no, they just want to be left alone and go about their business. It's not that they don't believe in equality, or they might have a different idea of how equality is achieved, and that doesn't necessarily mean they don't believe in equality. They just don't believe in being or on bullying. They support bullying. No, not necessarily. Or they're bullying someone. That doesn't necessarily mean they're bullying someone. A lot of times, a lot of times it's a statement taken in such a wrong way that it's basically blown out of proportion. And what ends up happening is you end up basically creating these things that are worse. And now you've created 50 million bullies when you only had a couple. You might have had only a couple bullies. You've got basically these whole armies of bullies that are claiming that they're trying to fight bullying. Yeah, thank you very much. And when you have the whole legacy media, and you got these children's stations that are actually saying, well, we need to fight bullying. Well, guess what? You're the ones that have actually caused this garbage in the first place. You've exploded this beyond the actual problem, and this has become so huge it's not even funny. And when it comes to equality with it, the fact is we're never going to get true equality without the actual reforms that I stated, and you're never going to get equality of outcome. Never going to happen. You get equality. You basically, the example of equality is everyone should be guaranteed the equality of uh, of basically opportunity, nothing more. If you don't make it, then guess what? It's your own fault. You can't say, but I didn't have the access to stuff when I was where I was growing up, and it's because of the color of my skin. No, guess what? Sorry, bud, but that's not how equality works. Equality is specific in how things actually are. And guess what? If you're actually for equality, equality means something very specific. That means equal. It does not mean, guess what? We get to pick on the whites and Asians because we don't like them, and we get to pick on the straight people because we don't like them, and we get to pick on the males because we don't like them. That's not how things work. And when it comes to bullying with it, it doesn't mean, hey, we don't like this person's statement, and we think this person might be from this political ideology, or we don't, or this statement is not to my liking, so let's attack them. This is what we're against bullying. Well, no, you're not. You're actually the bullies, and this is what ends up happening out there, and you're the problem. You're not the solution. You're the actual problem to the whole issues out there. And frankly, is if we actually want to look at a solution, we need to see that you guys actually need to be stopped. And that's the whole point. And that's where we're sitting at. And uh, now, if you like this, like, subscribe, and this is probably gonna be my last post for the night. I'll probably see you guys tomorrow morning with another one of these. That'll be on Monday morning. Um, Probably, what is it? Monday night for any like Filipino people or people out east, I should say. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye, everyone.